You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 301, Unlocking the Secret to Building Confidence with Nicole Kalil. If you're a business owner who wants to learn effective business strategies, improve time management, and elevate productivity to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. Today, you get to meet our guest, Nicole Kalil. Nicole's passion for eliminating gender expectations and redefining women's work is both what keeps her up at night and what gets her up in the morning. Well, that and an abundant amount of coffee. An in-demand speaker, author of Validation is for Parking, leadership strategist, respected coach, and host of the This Is Women's Work podcast. Her stalker-like obsession with confidence sets her apart from the constant stream of experts telling us to be confident. She actually shares how you build it and gives actionable tools you can implement immediately. A fugitive of the C-suite at a Fortune 100 company, she has coached hundreds of women in business, which has given her insight as to what structurally, systematically, and socially is and isn't serving both women and leaders within the organization. Maintaining some semblance of sanity in her different roles of wife, mother, and business owner successfully is her ongoing challenge. In whatever free time she has, she enjoys reading and wine guzzling, is an avid cheese enthusiast, a hotel snob, and a reluctant Peloton rider. In today's conversation, you will discover what confidence really is and how to build it, what having confidence helps you achieve, the importance of not trusting yourself in business, 5 confident builders and derailers that business owners can utilize, how even failure can effectively build confidence, how to know if you have imposter syndrome, and so much more. Before we dive into this conversation, I want to invite you to take my next level business owner quiz. Take just a few minutes to take this quiz, and I will tell you what your biggest challenge is from taking your business to the next level. I will also send you a curated playlist of episodes from the 300 episodes of Productivity Straight Talk. This curated list will give you strategies and tips to help you move forward and overcome this challenge. Head on over to amberdelagarza.com/quiz to take it today. And now let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Hi, Nicole. How are you today?
I'm great, Amber. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to Productivity Straight Talk. I would love to just jumpstart our conversation with finding out, why do I get to talk to you about confidence? Like, I'm sure there's got to be a story there that got you to this point in your career and to write a book. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself and how this became your topic of choice?
Absolutely. I think, as is true for so many of us, our pain can often become our purpose. And that's really what led me to being so obsessed with the topic of confidence. It started in my mid to late 20s. I was moving up, pretty quickly in my Fortune 100 finance firm. And for all intents and purposes, looked the part of the confident, independent woman on the rise. But the problem was how it looked externally did not match at all how it felt internally. I, was putting on a show and showing up the way I thought people wanted me to, the expectation that I felt, was put on me. And I just was I was lonely more often than not. I had
Yeah.
an above average spending problem to go with my above average income. And it just was not a pretty picture. And what I recognized is people were often commenting on my confidence. And I just was like, oh gosh, I should probably figure out what this is. And nobody could really tell me how to become confident. And so it became just sort of a personal project to learn about confidence, to develop my own. And as I was doing that, I began to recognize we don't really know what confidence is, and nobody is teaching us how we build it. And especially as women, we are often learning about what the demonstration of confidence looks like from the masculine lens. And I'm not anti-men by any stretch of the imagination. It just sometimes can feel inauthentic or not the right fit for us. And so all of that to say, in doing my own work for myself, it became much bigger and became something I wanted to share and pass forward to others.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. When you were going through this, was the phrase imposter syndrome a phrase? Like, was it given that like you're having these feelings, but now if people have these feelings, that's an accessible phrase and understanding, but I'm guessing that was not that common.
That's a great question. No, I had never heard that expression before. And maybe it was around and it just hadn't made its way to me. But it wasn't until later on in life when I started hearing about imposter syndrome and I was like, oh, that's what that was.
Right. Isn't that so helpful, even just to be able to put some words to feelings that you're feeling by yourself and like, what is this? And am I alone in this feeling?
Well, that you hit the nail on the head right there. Just that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Like there is a phrase for this. There's an expression that means what I was feeling. And if that's the case, then other people must be feeling it. And thank God it wasn't just me.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you went through your journey of cultivating and creating your own self-confidence, something that you said really resonated with me was that you were demonstrating it, but you didn't feel it inside, and you were demonstrating it as others would perceive confidence, not necessarily your own confidence, if I understood that correctly.
Yes.
So what was that journey of you finding your own self-confidence so that I'm assuming so that you can show up more joyfully in your career, right? But we'll share a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. I mean, even to this day, we find more information about what it means to look confident than what it means to be or become confident. You know, we talk about how to present confidently. We talk about how to show up confidently, how to dress confidently, how to everything. There's so many things. And so first it was unraveling that mixed and false message that confidence is about how you look to others, or that confidence is, you know, something you do as opposed to something you become. And really understanding what confidence actually is. And I totally geeked out and went to the etymology, the root of the word confidence. And ultimately, what I uncovered or discovered for myself was that confidence is firm and bold trust in self. Let me say that again. Confidence is firm and bold trust in self. It has literally nothing to do with the way you look. If it's increasing your trust in yourself, then it's a confidence builder. If it's not, then it's not. And that might vary. What builds our confidence or builds our trust in ourselves might vary between you or I or you who is listening. But that's really the answer of confidence. And then it had me dig into, okay, what are some things that do build my own trust? What are some things that are more general or universally build trust within ourselves? And how can I support people in focusing on those things? Because there's sort of this false equation of confidence out there. And it goes like this. If X happens, then I'll feel confident. Fill in X with whatever you want. If I fit into a certain size, if my children are perfectly well behaved, if I hit a certain level of income, if I get a promotion, if I get a certain amount of followers on social media, I mean, the list is endless, right?
Right.
If one of those things happens, if X happens, then I'll feel confident. And because confidence is about trust, it's really the reverse that actually works. When I'm confident, I have a higher probability of X. When I'm confident, I have a higher probability of achieving a certain level of income. Or when I'm confident, when I trust myself, I have a higher probability of being somebody that people want to follow and listen to. When I am confident, I have a higher probability of taking the risks, having the conversations, doing things that support me. Whatever it is, it's really the reverse.
You're flipping it on its head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the latter, the first one that you mentioned, it's just the word that kept popping up to me is it's elusive. It's just right outside of your grasp because you hit those followers and somebody else hit another benchmark and you're like, oh no, okay, that's not good enough. Or what I also hear a lot with women is like you achieve something and then you make excuses of how and why you achieved it. It was too slow, it was too fast, somebody helped you. And so you downplay those achievements, but in your head you thought, when I get there, then when I hit this revenue threshold, then when I land this client, then and when we talk here at Productivity Straight Talk about having a business that's truly joyful, that's really hard to be joyful when it's always just right outside of your grasp.
You just hit two really important pieces. Number one, part of imposter syndrome, one of the ways you know you have imposter syndrome, if you internalize your mistakes and externalize your successes. So one of the things you mentioned is, especially as women, we have a tendency, though I think it's something like 84 or 89% of people say they've experienced imposter syndrome. So it's not just women, but I know as a woman, we tend to downplay our successes. We tend to externalize, oh, I just got lucky. Even I've been blessed, or I had a great team, or whatever. We've been taught to do this. And that is actually contributing to increased imposter syndrome, not increased confidence. So I think that's just a really important distinction. And now I forgot the second thing I was going to say, but I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I love that.
Super important.
With your definition of trust in self, I want to ask the opposite question. So when we don't have trust in ourselves, how do you see that showing up in running businesses? So what is that cost of not trusting ourselves?
Well, I think so many things. First, if we don't trust ourselves, who will? And for most of us, when we're running a business, we're asking many people to trust us in some way, whether it's to use our services or to buy our product. And if we don't trust ourselves, it's going to be really hard to ask and to have other people trust us. So, I think that's a big reason. Another reason is when you don't trust yourself, you fall into the trap of doing what everybody else is doing, right? You're going to follow along with this person's, best practices or this person's process, or show up the way this person does on social media. We end up looking for that trust externally. And I think I identify that as one of the confidence derailers, is when we look for our trust in something or someone outside of us. It's like some weird life's game of where is Waldo, as if someone or something out there is walking around with your trust and you're supposed to go find it. Yeah. And so I think that can be really problematic because, and the other thing too, is I think we as business owners, if we don't trust ourselves, fall into the trap of trying to appeal to too wide of an audience, as opposed to really showing up as who we are, as our authentic selves, and creating a situation where the right people for us are going to gravitate towards us because they see us, as opposed to some watered down, very narrow, very vanilla, neutral version of us, which frankly isn't all that attractive. And if you think about it from a purely business perspective, if 1% of the population of the United States did business with you one time and invested $50, which for most of us, we're offering things that are at a much higher price point. But even that, you become a multi-millionaire. So we spend so much time trying to appeal to everyone that we don't recognize that our opportunity is to appeal to that 1% of the people who are like, yes,
I see you. Yeah.
I see you. You make sense to me. And when we when we are missing that trust in ourselves, it's much harder to show up authentically. I could go on with other reasons, but I think those are the biggest ones.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my pet peeves is that in business is like when you're not trusting yourself, you're always looking that somebody else has the answer. Right.
Mm.
And then over time, you try to drown out listening to your own voice. And then it becomes a habit where you're never checking in with yourself. You're thinking that expert, that coach, that person on the internet has the answer that I need to change my business or take it to the next level. And, even with the work that I do, I see it as partnering alongside my clients. And oftentimes it's highlighting places where they showed up and like they knew the right answer, they knew what was right for them, and just putting a mirror up so that they're building that positive proof or that bank of like, oh my gosh, look, I did that, I knew how to handle that situation, or I got overwhelmed and I went back to the tools, and like just reinforcing that with or without support. When you're getting support, you're getting it so that you're filling your own toolbox up so that you can move forward with expertise and confidence, I would say, in an area that you may have not had confidence in.
You're exactly right. I feel as a business owner, I need to, listen with my ears and also listen with my gut. And it needs to pass through both of those. So yeah, if I'm doing something new or launching something new or starting something new, it's confidence isn't, I know what I'm doing. Confidence is I'll figure it out. Right. And part of that is listening to other people, learning about best practices, but it needs to go through those two filters. Yes, you need to listen to other people but it needs to go through your gut. It needs to, you need to check in with yourself. Yeah. Is this right and true for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's so important.
I'll just share my own experience. I've been in business for 12 years. And I remember when I just realized like, I wasn't worried about the next client anymore. I wasn't worried about what was going to happen in the economy. I wasn't worried if a launch went or didn't work out. And I was interested. I was curious. I was like, well, for so long, I was like, what is the next thing? Like what's going to happen next? And always looking into the future. And the one thing that I can point it to was that I had enough track record that I was like, I'll figure it out. Like whatever's going to happen will happen. And now that I leaned on myself, I wasn't so much in the future. I was just in the present. Like, okay, well, whatever's going to happen, like the business has made it through different, economies, different situations, different number of clients. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you. I couldn't personally tell you, other than experience, how I got there with confidence so that I had the peace in my business, but I do know how important it was. So I would love to dive into what are ways in which you have learned that you can create confidence? Mm-hmm. Okay, no, I do want to ask that question, but let me back up. I actually wanted to ask a different question. Is it a way in which that you would think about confidence as you show up the same way in all areas of your life and business? Is that a way of thinking about it? Or is it more factual that you may feel more confident in, say, one area than another area? I'm assuming this is like a spectrum of confidence, not like I'm all out 100% one day, like a light switched and you're like, I'm just confident in all areas of life.
I'm so glad you asked that. I did research on this and looked into this. I think it's 68% of people say they feel confident in one aspect of their life, but not in others. So this is a very common experience. I think what my goal is, or maybe the ideal state is to trust yourself in all aspects of your life. That doesn't mean, though, that everything's going according to plan and you're winning in all aspects of life, or that, you achieve in every way. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is 100% confident 100% of the time. Maybe narcissists, but that is a mental condition. That is not reality, right? So that's not the goal. This is only ever always going to be a journey, and you will have periods in time and places in your life and situations where you trust yourself more easily than in others. But I think the opportunity is to choose it and to build it in the various aspects of our lives. And you may show up differently in different ways from a place of trust. But what is most important to me first and foremost is that you feel in your being, in your body, that you're coming from a place of trusting yourself. And again, trusting yourself doesn't mean you have it all figured out or you have all the answers. Trusting yourself is, I'll be okay no matter what.
Or okay, that is the gold in today's episode. Now, it took me a little bit to articulate the question, but I was really wanting you to say is that the goal isn't that you're going to be confident 100% of the time, because I didn't want anyone walking away from today's episode thinking, again, that's an elusive goal of like, that's not the goal is to be 100% all the time. It's a journey to access this more frequently and in all areas of your life. I mean, you beautifully said that. And thank you so much for,
I'll even one up and say, if anybody tells you they're confident all the time, it's bullshit and you should no longer trust or believe them.
Right. Okay. So this is good because we want to normalize it. Like, that's why we're having these conversations. We want to normalize if you're not feeling that way 100% of the time. We just we're going to jump into some tools so that you can access this more frequently and consistently, I think, is a good goal. More frequently and consistently trusting yourself in more areas of your business and life.
Yeah. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So where would you like to start? What are some tools or actionables to build this trusting of ourselves confidence?
So I identified 5 confidence builders that I think are pretty general and universal, meaning they work for all of us. There are probably more than 5, but these 5, I think everybody can relate to, especially small business owners, entrepreneurs. So the 5 confidence builders, I'll give them to you real quick, and then we can go into each of them, are action, failure, which is shocking to most people, but failure absolutely builds confidence. The concept of confidence being a choice versus a feeling. So choosing confidence, giving yourself grace. And then the 5th one is an understanding and follow through action towards the internal building of trust. So it's the things that you do that build your own trust with yourself. And we can go through a ton of examples there, but those are the 5. I guess, do you want to dive into any of those 5 at a higher level?
I mean, all of them, of course. But I mean, like, I'll just share a couple thoughts just hearing it. So grace, I say that so frequently to my clients, is like, how can we give ourselves grace? Like, it's just like the gift of not shaming ourselves, not beating ourselves up, not, going backwards, but saying, okay, and today's a new day, or tomorrow's a new day. I get to reset. And what I did or chose to do yesterday doesn't need to determine how I show up, specifically in my world, like in my business today. It's a lot. I love the grace, but I want to hear what you have to say about that. Actually, can we go through all of them? Maybe we won't sit on all of them forever, but I do want to hear how you are, describing, say, action. Like, is all action equal? Or are you talking about some specific action in specific areas?
So I'm so glad that you asked that question. I used to think it was just action in general, but over time, I've sort of evolved it to action toward what matters most to you. So action for the sake of action can be a trap that we sometimes fall in, and it creates some other unintended consequences. But one step in front of the other toward what matters most to you is what I'm talking about here. I think also we often default to like only big actions count. Like I used to be when I would work out, that if, I didn't work out for an hour and I wasn't dripping sweat, that I put in air quotes, didn't count. And I've come full circle on this. Then, 5 minutes is better than 0 minutes. Any movement matters. And so the same thing is true in all aspects of your life. Even the smallest step towards what matters is a confidence builder. Being in action is, super important. And it just builds trust with self, because it's little risks that get built up over time that lead to big results.
Yeah. So as I'm hearing that, what I'm thinking of is someone that might say, I can't take action because I don't know how, or I'm not confident, right? And so what you're saying is practicing doing it anyways. And then on the other side of it will be, the opportunity to build that trust in yourself, but that you don't need to let not trusting or not being 100% like, is this the right choice? When I talk to clients, it's like they get paralysis and there's no action because they don't trust they're going to make the right decision. And I'm talking big decisions, and I'm talking choosing something off their task list. They could be like, I don't know which one. So they get stuck and don't choose anything, which feels very unproductive. And my answer to this always is do one. And if it's wrong, stop and go do the other one. But it's probably not wrong. Like, it all has to get done. And the action creates that momentum. And the inaction is what we want to avoid. So that's the one that we don't want, is the inaction. Anything on the list is better than inaction.
You're exactly right. So overthinking is a confidence derailer. So I have 5 confidence builders, but I also have 5 confidence derailers. And one of them is overthinking. Overthinking is problematic, as you said, because it leads to inaction. And inaction is problematic because it leads to regrets. And if you ask the most confident, the most successful people, even people at the later stages of their life, what they regret the most, 9.8 times out of 10, they'll tell you about the things they didn't do.
Right.
Not the things that they did. And so it really is about one small step. And just think about it. Like, at the end of the day, if you've done nothing, we have a tendency to beat ourselves up. At the end of the day, if you've done something, anything, it's a build up of internal pride in self, internal trust. I said I was going to do it, and I did it. I don't care how big or small it is.
Yes.
I said I was going to do it, and I did it. That is that little bit of confidence building that you can do every single day that yields phenomenal confidence down the road.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a client that I had, and she represents many clients that are high achievers. And so if it wasn't all done on the list, it didn't count. Right.
Right.
And the list is never going to get done, or we're out of business. And so the affirmation, that we worked on, that she consistently told herself, was like, asking yourself, what's one thing I did to move the business forward? And it could be big or small. No longer do we quantify big or small. It was just the consistency of one thing moved forward, not did I get the whole list done or did I not? And then the gap between that of all the feelings, right? Of it's like a hopeless goal to think you're going to get it all done. So that turns into much frustration.
And another one of the confidence derailers, perfectionism. So perfectionism is the enemy of confidence. I want to say it that strongly. You cannot be confident and be a perfectionist at the same time. And as a recovering perfectionist myself, it is really painful to say that and hear that, but it is unequivocally true, because perfectionism is an unachievable, unattainable goal that you can't help but fall short from. And then what do? We beat ourselves up. Our inner critic, or I call head trash, gets running rampant in our own brain. And it's so obvious how that derails our confidence. Separately, it also creates separation in our relationships, but that's another topic.
I feel like you
time.
and I can be chatting forever. Okay. All right. So we're going to go to number 2, which you said was shocking. And I had a big smile on my face. So failure creates confidence. How?
It unequivocally does. And it took me a couple years to buy into it, because I just didn't want to, because I avoided failure at all costs and thought, that made me bad. But the evidence is clear, and the research proves that mistakes, missteps, fear, doubt, failure, whatever you want to call it, all of those are confidence builders, because it's about the choices that you make in those moments that are super impactful. Let me put it this way. It is so easy to trust ourselves when everything is going according to plan. When you're winning, when you're achieving, when you're succeeding, trusting yourself requires almost nothing from you. But when the shit hits the fan, when you've failed or made a mistake, or you're facing immense fear or dealing with self-doubt, that is where the confidence magic happens. Because if you choose to trust yourself in those really hard moments, you build a muscle. And also the awareness that we all have, that you said earlier, that if you look back with the benefit of hindsight, we can see how something worked for our benefit or why something happened or how we grew from it, because failure is a neutral event. I understand that it never feels neutral when you're experiencing it, but it is still a neutral event. How do I know? Because we could line up 10 people and have them experience the exact same, and I put in air quotes, failure, and we'd have 10 different interpretations of that event. And so if we are the ones making up meaning about this event, then why not choose a more productive or more empowered interpretation of the same event? Example, what could be seen as a failure. I'll give an example. 1 year in my business, I lost 80% of my revenue. Now, again, it didn't feel good when I was experiencing it. And I just kept telling myself, the only thing that's missing is the benefit of hindsight. I don't yet know why or how or in what way this is going to work for me. I just get to trust that it does, one foot in front of the other toward what matters. And now, with the benefit of the hindsight, I know that that was one of the greatest gifts that could have been given to me, because it forced a redirect in my business to something that I couldn't even have imagined prior to that year. So all that to say, you can choose to see it as a failure, or you can choose to see it as a gift or a lesson or an opportunity or a redirect, or a one door closes so many others can open, or this is an opportunity for me to build my confidence, or 1 million other interpretations.
Yeah.
But it's when we do these things that we build deep, lasting trust with ourselves, in ourselves. And that's why failure is a confidence builder.
Oh, okay, that was such a great example. And next time, if it happens again and your business tanks 25% or 40%, you're like, I got this, right? Like there's positive proof, like the business pivoted, you made it through it. And what will that experience feel like in the moment? If it happens again, somewhere even close to it, it probably is going to feel better than it did the first time, where you're thinking maybe you didn't have trust that this was going to work out, and this is it. And what if the business doesn't make it? And I had a friend share the phrase positive proof. And so these failures are positive proof that you made it through it. And to me, that gives me the confidence of like, yep, I've seen some stuff now. I'm a bit seasoned. This isn't anything. It's not going to rattle me. And so I also welcome it. Not in the moment. We're both like in agreement on that. Like in the moment, we don't welcome it, but I always think like, oh, how is this going to serve me in the future? Like, who do I get to be in the future because of this once we're on the other side of it? And look, we're talking business, but life is messy. Right. And so just think of all the things, and maybe you're new in business. This is just from my heart. This just like, maybe you're new in business and you're thinking, great, I just have to have years under my belt before I'm confident. No. You may have had a messy life where there's a lot of positive proof you've gotten through some hard things, and just transfer that to another arena. And you tell yourself, like, I've done hard things, like I've gotten through stuff, and you can have that in your business as well.
I'm so glad you said that. My husband is a really good example of that. He lost his mom in his early 20s. And he's a very successful entrepreneur, but when really tough things happen, or really big challenges or really big failures, he often says, losing your mom is hard. This, not that hard. If I could recover from that, if I can get to a healthy place with that, then I can get to a healthy place and recover from this too. And so I'm so glad that you said that. We have a whole collection of experiences. There's a quote that says something like, you've recovered from 100% of your challenges up to this point. That's a pretty good track record. I would bet on that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So bet on that.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. Number 3 is choice. So feeling confident or choosing confidence is a choice.
Yeah. So I think really what I wanted to point out here is a few things. Number one, a lot of us believe that confidence is a feeling. Either we have it or we don't, or we woke up feeling it or we didn't. And then we, sort of make decisions about what actions we take or what conversations we have or what outreaches we do based on whether or not we're feeling it. So what I want you to know is confidence. You can feel confident, but it stems from choices that we make. And you as a business owner, you as the listener know this, right? Mm-hmm. Think about if you had a bad morning with your kids and you have to go into a potential sales conversation. What do? We dust ourselves off, we wipe ourselves up, and we show up at our best possible way because it's what you got to do. That's an example of choosing confidence, or really just not being beholden to our feelings, and understanding that it's okay to have your feelings, but your feelings shouldn't have you. And confidence is a choice that you can make any minute, any second, any day, any week you want. And that to me is so powerful. It's so much more powerful than this idea that you feel it or you don't.
Yes. I have a quote on my wall that I have framed, and it says, productivity is a choice we make every day. Mm-hmm. And the joke is sometimes we're making it every hour or every minute. Like, you have to choose you're going to choose how you show up. And if you're waiting to just wake up and pop out of bed and say, I feel productive today, that's not who you are. You're being productive when you make a choice of, investing. Well, I describe it as investing your best time into your best activities, right? The things that matter most. Not all activities are created equal. We're in such alignment on so many things, but at the root, it's a choice.
Yeah.
The environment's not going to be perfect. The day's not going to be perfect. The kids aren't going to act exactly right. You're not going to feel like being productive, but if you can choose that, it's the same muscle as choosing that having confidence in this moment or in this situation is going to serve you best.
It's such a great example. And in full transparency, I'll share with you that I probably wake up feeling productive maybe 5 to 10 days a year. Like, I'm telling you, I've just built the habit of choosing to do things that then kick off the productivity so that the feeling catches up. There's an expression we use a lot in business, fake it till you make it. I would replace it with choose it until you become it. Right? You just choose it over and over and over again until the feeling catches up. I'm not a big fan of faking things anymore. It doesn't serve me well. So it's just semantics, but I like choose it until you become it so much more.
Yeah. And then that becomes the habit you're focusing on, is that you have the habit to choose confidence, choose productivity, choose kindness. Like, what, even if you don't feel it, like, what am I choosing right now?
Yeah.
One of my affirmations when I was a lot younger all the time would say, what is the highest choice for me?
Right? I love that.
And I would always say that, like, what's my highest choice? What's my highest choice right now? Some variation of that. And what that meant was a lot of things, but it meant, like, who am I going to choose to be right now? What belief am I going to choose? If there was a decision to be made, like, what's my highest choice? But yeah, I totally believe in choices. And, as a mom, we talk about choices a lot too. I got a 13-year-old son, and it's all about choices. So I think this shows up in every aspect of our lives. All right,
Absolutely.
Number 4 is grace, which I cheated and went to right away, but I want to hear what you have to say. Why is grace so important for helping us trust ourselves?
Yeah, well, for all the reasons you already said. And what this fundamentally goes down to for me as it relates to confidence is this concept that we spend the bulk of our lives inside of our own minds. We might as well make it a nice place to be. And for the vast majority of us, it's not. It's a very, chaotic, unhealthy, toxic place to be, because what we say to ourselves about ourselves is very rarely kind and very rarely true, right? We just say all sorts of nasty stuff to ourselves. So this is really about changing the internal narrative. And I'm going to simplify this, but for me, giving grace is speaking to yourself the way you would someone you love, because we should first and foremost be someone that we love. But the idea, think about for a second what you say to yourself about yourself. Would you say that to your spouse, to your partner, to your best friend, to your child? My guess is the answer is no. So we really need to stop saying it to ourselves. And so giving ourselves grace is learning to communicate to ourselves about ourselves like someone we love. And that doesn't mean blowing smoke. That doesn't mean only ever always being a cheerleader. We can still challenge ourselves. We can still face uncomfortable truths. We just do it in a way we would with someone we love. So like when my husband does something that I'm not so excited about, the way I communicate with him in that is the same way that I want to communicate with myself when I do something that I'm not so excited about.
Yes. Through my own journey of practicing grace with myself, when I first went on this journey, one of my big holdups was that, well, am I just giving myself an excuse to show up this way? Like I'm just letting myself off the hook. And the truth is that not letting myself off the hook wasn't working, right? Like beating yourself up, just speaking in that way. But in your example, with your husband, it's like, okay, well, I didn't like that. That wasn't great for whatever, our marriage. And I give you grace. Like, it's not like I give you a blanket card of like, just do whatever you want. All is good in the world, rainbows and unicorns. And I didn't understand that at first. It was really hard for me to be like, how do you have both? How do you say, okay, I recognize that wasn't the best choice for myself yesterday, but that doesn't need to carry over to today, or it doesn't need to carry over how I'm speaking to myself now, which is the grace. But that was my own experience with it.
Yeah. And let me give one other example that it is for me, giving myself grace is because I'm a recovering perfectionist, is about meaningful and realistic expectations. So I wrote a book last year and released it. And one of the things that I told myself, the internal narrative from a place of confidence, is this is the first book I've ever written. I put my heart and soul, blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I wrote the very best book I could with the experience and knowledge that I had at the time that I wrote the book. I also know that I'm a first-time author. So, this wasn't going to win any Nobel Peace Prizes. And I didn't have expectations of, being on the New York Times bestseller list. And I just kept telling myself, I'm sure there are going to be people who love it. I'm sure there are going to be people who hate it. There'll be some 5 stars and 1-star reviews. And nothing changes the fact that I was supposed to write this book and I did the very best that I could. That's the grace that I'm going to give myself every single day as I birth this, because that's writing a book is the professional equivalent of birthing a child in my experience.
Yes, I've heard that before.
Oh, it's crazy. Anyway, it was just really important to me that I gave myself grace and managed the voice in my head, knowing that I was going into this risky endeavor and I had no control over the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the practice of grace is one worth pursuing. For sure. And I think it's a different experience for everyone. For you, you're like, this is why I needed to practice grace. For me, I had my own reasons why I need to practice grace. And, for my clients, when they're being so hard on themselves, I'm like, can you extend grace for yourself? Can you see, like you said, I give this example all the time, is what if this was your child, or what if this was someone you loved? How would you see it that way? And it's like, of course I wouldn't do that, but why do we have a double standard for ourselves? And really kind of unifying that, I think, is just loving ourselves in a different way.
Agreed.
All right. Number 5 is internal trust.
Yes. So I think the best way to do this one is to think, how do you build trust with the people in your life? How do they build trust with you? And it'll give you some insight into what's important to you specifically, uniquely as an individual as it relates to trust. But let me give a few sort of general examples that I think speak to most of us. These are some ways that we can build internal trust with ourselves that generally work. First, keep your commitments. Again, this is not about perfectionism. Nobody keeps 100% of their commitments 100% of their times, but keep more than you don't. And as it relates to trust in self, I think 2 things to be mindful of. Don't overcommit, and keep the commitments you make to yourself at the same rate if not at a higher rate than the ones you make to other people. We're pretty good about keeping our commitments to our clients or our children or our spouse or our friends. And we often let the commitments we make to ourselves go by the wayside. And as it relates to your own trust with yourself, I think it's pretty obvious to see why keeping those commitments are incredibly important to your own confidence. Other examples, speaking your truth, standing up for yourself, surrounding yourself with people who are supportive of your trust versus who detract or challenge it. I know this sounds crazy. Sleep. If we don't sleep enough, we basically operate in our days like a drunk person. And let's be real, nobody trusts a drunk person. So
there is statistics out there. I've written about it. I have stumbled upon those facts. It is crazy how much lack of sleep can do to our ability to show up.
And especially as business owners, sleep often sort of goes by the wayside. So that I think is a really important one. Creating and communicating boundaries. The list is endless, but again, I invite you to think, when you build trust with somebody, what are the most important ways that that's happening? And then turn that inside between you and you. And that's how you begin to build that internal trust that real confidence is made of.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go back to the first example you gave. Man, that shows up so often. And what I like to share is like, you're the same person that would never just no call, no show for a business meeting is the same person that can do never no call, no show for yourself. Right. Mm-hmm. And we're talking things like working out. Maybe that's for yourself, right? You negotiate that right off, but you wouldn't ever not show up for a loved one, showing up to even just work on your business. You're like, okay, today I'm going to do this. And then for whatever reason, you don't show up, but you'll show up for everybody else. How do you bridge that? Just like the grace, the way you're talking to somebody else, the way you show up for somebody else is who you are. It's the same person. So I just invite my clients to access that for themselves. And it's literally life and business changing when we can get in sync with how we show up externally and internally.
Well, and I'm in a service-based business, so I am the business. My ability to show up at my best is what makes or breaks my business. And so it took me a long time to recognize that, but prioritizing my mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, financial health above all things is what makes my business so profitable and so successful. Taking care of myself allows for me to deliver my best. And I used to think, I was supposed to sacrifice myself at all costs for everything else. And, I was in the grind and I was doing well, but I never really moved to that next level until I started letting some of those things go.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And just to bring that full circle to your example of sleep. So I, have spoken, I speak to large groups, small groups, you name it. And one of the things that I used to ask, and I remember the first time I asked it, I said, if I could wave a magic wand and gift you back 5 hours a week, what would you do with it? And I'm thinking they're going to answer things like work on my business, exercise, spend more time with my kids. Nope. The first person in the room goes, sleep. And then you hear it echoed, sleep, sleep. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, that's interesting. I ask it again, sleep. I ask it again. And I was like, what? Okay. So there's something to this of all the things. And, I'm obviously talking to people that want more time, right? And want to be more efficient with their time is why is it sleep? And while this is not proven, it's my own thoughts of talking to hundreds and hundreds of business owners. Sleep is one of the only things we do solely for ourselves. When the kids need something, a spouse needs something, business partner needs something, anybody needs something, that those hours of sleep keep getting creeped. You wake up earlier, you go to bed later. And yet, to your point, sleep is the one thing that if you're not getting, it doesn't matter what strategy that you have in business, what productivity strategy, you cannot function without the foundational, investing in yourself to get good sleep. So it's very interesting. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, if Amber could give me 5 more hours of sleep a week, that is reason enough to look at how you're, utilizing your time and running your business, because it's worth it. It's really important to prioritize sleep.
Yeah. And the research is obvious and in complete support of, if you get the right amount of sleep for yourself, you're significantly more productive, effective, and efficient throughout your day. So whatever that right number is, it's probably somewhere between 6 to 9 hours, 6 to 10 hours, I think is what the research shows. But I am an 8-hour plus per night sleeper. And like, everybody who knows me, my 10-year-old, she was telling somebody like, mom needs her sleep or she's really cranky.
Yes, I am too. I'm closer to 9 hours. Like I'm definitely 8 plus, but closer to 9.
Same.
And my husband functions on way less hours than me. And that's his, like, he functions just fine. I have known that about myself. And I lean into it because I'm like, that's obviously my body, and not to judge it. I'm like, this is just what I need to be my best person, best mom, best business owner, all the things.
So interesting. And I don't know if this translates at all, but my husband is the same. Like he was a 6-hour, 5 or 6 hours a night of sleep. We both got these Aura rings for each other for Christmas a couple of years ago. And his ring basically was sending the message that he needed to get more sleep. And so, this objective piece of information, how to do that. And what he would tell you now is he was functioning fine, but he has noticed an increased amount of productivity, effectiveness, efficiency. And he's now a 7+ hour
sleeper
per night. Yeah.
So. No, that's great. I don't know how we ended up on sleep. Sleep is all the things. Like when we think about confidence too, just to fold this full circle, I think oftentimes our confidence is shaken when we have to make decisions. And to all your points of productivity, but it's much more difficult. There's so much research that it's more difficult to make decisions when you're exhausted and lack of sleep. Mm-hmm. You're not able to clearly think, and that. And so you're like, what if I make the wrong decision? It's like this vicious circle. So get sleep. It helps everything.
Yeah. And if confidence is about trust and your body is telling you you require more sleep, you can choose to trust it or you can choose not to. Choosing to trust it increases your confidence. Choosing not to might be chipping away at it.
Yes. Okay. So as we close up, I'd love to share how our listeners can learn more from you, read your book, and share a little bit about your services. Like how do your service-based business owner? So share how you work with your clients. I would love for you to do that.
Yeah, of course. So NicoleKalil.com is the best way to find me and everything about me and my work. My book is called Validation is for Parking. It's a little snarky, just like me, but you can get it on Amazon. But if I might put in the request to ask your local bookstore to order it for you, we want to keep local bookstores in business. As far as my work, it kind of falls into 3 major categories. Speaking is the bulk of what I do. So, events, that type of thing. Coaching, I coach 10 people at a time. That's a boundary for me. So I stay super engaged with them. And then the last category is what I call ampliship. We've all heard of mentorship. We've all heard of sponsorship or allyship. Ampliship is women supporting women publicly. And we do that through social media support groups, getting more women on podcasts. I have my own podcast called This Is Woman's Work. And there are retreats, masterminds, all sorts of stuff like that. So again, I'm not anti-men by any means, but I get the most amount of passion and energy when I'm working with women, specifically working women. And so that third category of ampliship is all that stuff.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. So we'll make sure we share everything in the show notes. You're listening to this podcast, be sure to search her podcast and go take a listen. This has been such a great conversation. And thank you for bringing such value and just a needed conversation to Productivity Straight Talk. I appreciate it.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks, Amber.
I have loved having you listen to this episode of Productivity Straight Talk. And I sure hope you found this conversation to be insightful and encouraging for you to take some next steps in helping with you building your own confidence. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. Nicole shared very actionable steps to help you build your confidence. And why I loved this conversation is because she's truly approaching the conversation of confidence in a very different way than I've heard so many others do so. I know when I hear just be confident, it feels like you have to lie or fake it till you make it. And that has never set right with me. I am so happy that she has, taken her pain and turned it into her passion and her expertise to really share a different perspective to this conversation about confidence. If you are new here, I just want to welcome you and say thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And for those of you that are longtime listeners, thank you so much for sharing Productivity Straight Talk with fellow business owners. This is truly how I can help serve more and more people with conversations just like this. So that's my Straight Talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.